All you need to know: STOs, IPOs, IEOs. The fintech industry is awash with acronyms and buzzwords. Let's delve into the differences and similarities from both a legal and technical perspective. Giacomo Arcaro, Fidelity House International. Gordon Einstein, Crypto Law Partners. Ruswan Gavriluk, TAS Fund. Max Kops, BTC Echo. Kokila Alag, Calm Legal. Moderated by Ransu Saluvara, Token Market.
Yeah.
Just say something loud.
It's
There you go.
Is it on now? Yeah.
Audience,
All right.
is his mic on?
Yes.
There you go.
Now it is on. Yes. Hey.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. All right. So here we are.
Yeah.
After the nuclear winter, crypto winter, we're rebounding now on a new era.
Bitcoin is back over 8,000.
Yeah.
It's
As
there.
of 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
So-
exactly. It's doing good. Yeah, exactly. And so now, first of all, while it says there that STOs, IPOs, and IEOs, then let's go back a little bit on ICOs. So what happened? Are they now completely dead? Is there a comeback?
Well,
Where are we?
Yeah, we just finished our ICO from one of my customers, and we did good. But I do believe that ICOs has just reached the peak, and now is going a little bit down because an STO and IO is roaring. So that's why.
Yes, IEOs are they are lipstick on a pig.
Yeah.
That they're not there's no innovation. It's just that you just put it on the exchange for instant flipping.
Yeah.
Basically. So,
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but I do believe that STOs could really help the market because it's really an innovation it's another way to call it IPO, which everyone could jump on board. So it's what ICO has been for startups, STO will be for IPOs.
Yeah, exactly, the pre-IPOs.
Yeah,
Yeah, there you go.
Pre-IPOs, yeah.
I think that, I've been hearing the tenor of the prior speakers, and I think the downfall or lessening of ICOs and everyone going to STOs is not necessarily a function of institutional interest. I think if you kill all the fish, no one's going to be a fisherman. But it's just because they got regulated to death, but improperly, I would suggest. The SEC just came out with a no-action letter and with an interpretive release where they acknowledged that a particular token was not a security and qualified it as something else.
That's a stable coin, basically. That's like a voucher for, was it a travel company?
In that
or
case,
airline?
it was not quite, it was a stable coin backed with some assets, but the fact that they even acknowledged the fact that something might not be a security just validated that a category such as that is possible.
Because it's a closed-loop payment system or in-game currency, basically, where they put it as an exemption.
Yeah, I'm not overly impressed with their no-action letter,
Yeah.
and the fact that they came out with their guidance the exact same day as that no-action letter looks to me kind of to be a setup. I mean, how coincidental is that? But I think, literally it's one day apart. That doesn't happen with the SEC. Yeah. I wonder what backroom shenanigans went on. But they have been forced into a position, which is just plain logic, that not everything on the planet is a security. Dogs and software licenses and cats are not securities. And if you tokenize them, they're still not securities. So I think utility tokens just logically make sense, and then ICOs make sense also.
Exactly. I always say that these exemptions are needed, because otherwise what happens is that we go into a world where everything is security, and then all the regulators would have to add thousands of jobs. So in-game currency, closed-loop payment system, loyalty programs, software license, and donations, like Ethereum was. So they always need to be exemptions. Of course, now the challenge comes when the value can go up massively. That wasn't planned before.
Let me throw this out here. The fact that something goes up in value does not make it a security. Gold goes up in value. A house goes up in value.
Yeah.
It really is the expectation of the parties and whether you're making money from an enterprise.
But SEC kind of took that stance that when it goes up in value, it becomes a security.
Yes, and the SEC overreached, and that's why a lot of companies are doing their offerings outside the US that's where you're getting some pushback against the SEC finally, though we have need to improve a lot.
Yes, I mean, you started with the crypto winter, but I actually compared much more to IPOs than to ICOs, if we're speaking about STOs. And you're already diving into security regulations, and that's what it is about, because apparently it's not the security if you tokenize a dog, and that's the point. You're not regulating the technology. You have to ask for the purpose, like, why are we doing that? And it's much more approachable to compare IPOs to STOs, because, well, what are you doing at the end? You're giving out financial products, or you're issuing securities, and it's not about the initial idea that we had with ICOs, because, I mean, many ICOs did an ICO for the purpose of avoiding regulation, but just claiming they're selling a product instead of selling a security. But that's a totally different field, because in ICOs you have the value proposition of the project directly attached to the security or to the token, while an STO is fully decoupled from that. So an STO is just like a new way of doing IPOs, and that's why it makes much more sense to compare with that. And we have to ask for the purpose. We don't have to ask like how to make ICOs better, not just put a regulation on it. We have to ask like how can we raise capital more efficient? How can we solve the existing problems or the same things that we have with IPOs and do them more efficient? So that's why we are then touching the security regulations, and we're not speaking about tokens, we're not speaking about ICOs in the classical way of having like things that are attached to the actual value proposition.
I mean, clearly we have to look at what we're trying to accomplish, and there's more than one thing we're trying to accomplish, and then make regulations for each one of those cases.
Of course.
I think that the offerers did overreach by making everything an ICO in the beginning, no doubt. I'm sure you'll have comments about this. But the regulators also overreached by trying to make everything a security.
Yes.
I mean, and by the way, to your point, just because something's not regulated as a security, that doesn't mean it's not regulated. Okay, especially if you're in the US, everything is regulated. I can't breathe without there being a legal implication. Commodities are regulated, software licenses are regulated. So when these securities regulators call everything a security, I go, get back to your own jurisdiction, buddy. So
when we have regulations, we have licenses, we have utility tokens, we have security tokens, and then you have the ICOs, IEOs. At the end of the day, we're talking about crowdfunding for these assets classes, different ones that we've created. So to say that ICO market is over, no, till the time we have utility, till we have actual services that cannot be a security, ICOs would always be there. Maybe, yes, we're moving towards IEOs now, which is now again looking at what SEC's approach towards IEOs is. It will depend on how IEOs grows in this market. But as we were discussing earlier, security tokens is a very different investor market. ICOs, IEOs is a very different crowdfunding startup market. So both have their value. Rightfully, if one is not regulated, at least they are licensed. The main point that a regulator, be it anywhere in the world, be it in Europe, be it in US, be it in UAE where we come from, it's a consumer protection. It's going to make sure the transparency is there, the trust is there, the technology is to its optimum use. So all these factors play in with what we say, how IEOs, ICOs, and STOs are going to work. So then overlapping, and it's going to be quite an interesting approach. We're doing some hybrid projects where we have ICOs because of the utility part of the project, and then we definitely have the security element kicking in later on.
Well, let me throw this at the group if I can.
Yeah.
Do you think IPOs of traditional securities are dying, dead, or?
No, they are just overvalued. So here's the problem. Exactly. The next good point here is to go through that. Is that okay? Here comes an STOs now. What type of an STO is an IDO? So the starting point, the STOs that we're working on now, we have 10, 15 on the pipeline, 5 in a kind of execution level already towards this summer and early fall. So on these ones, they're not going to tokenize the entire company and kind of do what I call STO IPO. Yeah. They're going to just that portion of that fundraising. Is it then 5%, 10%, 20%? That's going to be on the first stage tokenized. So I see that there's a kind of this staging happening now on the STOs. So they're not like a mini IPOs necessarily yet. And now, anyway, we are way too early on the market. I feel that we're 2 steps ahead now, and the market is not ready. But back to that I would love to hear your take on what type of an STOs now then will be the first kick-ass ones. Because now we need, remember on the ICOs, it was kind of the DAO, even though that it was a failure, it was the Kickstarter on that sense that it was 60 million. 60 million got stolen, but then that money got refunded to everybody, and they started to invest that on more ICOs in the fall 2016.
Yeah. No, I mean.
So what type of what will be the STO, like now the tipping point that they will become, and what kind of companies they will be?
Okay, now I'm advisors, so I saw all the market, how it's going on. So on LinkedIn, I received like 10 requests per day, and since last year, we're like 100 requests per day of ICO, were almost of the shitty projects. Nowadays, is arriving blockchain project, startup project based on blockchain. They never mention ICO or IEO or STO, just startup blockchain. And it's really interesting because investors is going to invest into project that has got the triangle, which is blockchain, IoT, and artificial intelligence. Everything is moving toward that direction. And the best way to if you want to create a company and go for seed round A, B, nowadays, if you have a blockchain startup-based company, the best way is STO. Even if it costs a lot, you're going through a lot of regulations, but that's the way, because there's a new way to accept the IPO.
And now when you talk about the STOs, are you talking about company shares, or are you talking turning ICO tokens into the securities, which is the, silly Americans do that they
no, okay.
Worst of both worlds.
No, there's no escamotages, there's no, when I talk to STO, I talk about IPOs that going through blockchain with security tokens. Yeah. It's not a way to camouflage the ICO.
Yeah, IPO is of course true, because it is actually initial public offering. So, so STOs are not that, they are still.
Yeah.
Every STO so far has been a private placement.
Yeah.
Much, right? So.
Yes, I was going to say we have to distinguish, and this is all brand new, but we have to distinguish between tokenized securities, which is when you tokenize an existing traditional security type like stock, bond, note, and then there's security tokens. And security tokens are a brand new animal. They haven't been fully defined yet, but those would be if you have some sort of non-standard investment contract or investment interest in an entity, like a fee-based, like when a proof-of-stake block producer earns fees. That's not traditional equity. That's not traditional debt in the underlying company. That's a whole new model. But at least in the US, that would almost certainly qualify as a security. So I think the first baby steps are going to be to do the security, tokenized security version of an IPO, which is a traditional IPO, but done using tokenized securities. Yes. And then we're going to evolve to what we should evolve to, which is security tokens. And that's more of a DAO, DAC kind of concept.
I like the distinction you're making between the business side and the tech side, because that's what I also saw, like you mentioned, in especially 2017 and 18, where everybody was speaking about we are doing an ICO and we are doing a utility token. And this sentence doesn't make sense for me from the very beginning, because you're not doing a utility token for the purpose of utility token. Like, what is your product? Like, what are you programming into this utility token is the question. It should be about the value, and the tech is the other side. So that's the main distinction between ICOs and STOs, because as I mentioned in ICOs, it's about blockchain projects by nature. As you said, you have something where the token is attached to. And the reason why we even ask the question if ICOs are dead is just we put ICOs on projects where they didn't make sense. We didn't put them, we didn't put a token in a model where the token was used. We just put a utility token because we believed it wouldn't be regulated as a security.
Or then we issue a crazy amount of tokens also. Like, if we issue, 1 billion tokens for a project that is not even running yet, of course, like, that's also too big of a deal, kind of like same as Uber was now too big of a deal.
Yeah. I mean, we as an industry obviously overreached and got our hands slapped. And I think a lot of projects deserved it. I mean, when you issue these pre-functional tokens on day one, and you're using those funds to build a platform, and the platform may or may not be built at some point, that's pretty clear that's a security. I mean, people
are not. Like Gibraltar is not making definition now that it has to be built platform. But now, in my understanding, it's Switzerland and USA where they want that to be the platform.
I'm referring to the early days of ICOs.
Yeah.
I think that when it's a good point. When we had no regulatory clarity from these different jurisdictions, and everyone was kind of betting that these pre-functional tokens wouldn't be securities or pretending that they weren't.
Yeah.
And there was obviously at least coherent arguments that they were securities. I think brave jurisdictions like Gibraltar are now taking a stand that, if it's going to become functional, you would know better than I would, that they're not securities. At least in the US, though, that doesn't fly. That's the Munchie case.
And also you need to look at in Gibraltar, the approach you've taken is more on what we say for a regulator, a principle base that let the technology grow, let the use cases come out, and then we decide.
We have that license, that in principle DLT license.
I'd say where one of the regulators we know has recently changed the definition. They initially came out with security tokens definitions, and now they've renamed it as digital securities. So they've gone back to it and saying that for us it's a traditional security. The only thing that you're adding on top of it is using technology. You're issuing tokens instead of the normal documents that you've been releasing. So it's pretty much the same as how a regulator is taking it. So for a startup to do a STO would be extremely challenging. Because when the regulator is asking you for your 3-year financial statements, your credibility, your market, your documentation, startups don't have that.
That's why then in Europe we have equity crowdfunding. We can now raise up to 8 million.
Exactly.
We are now on the latest UK sandbox on that one, up to 8 million from retail. And the companies can also be from any enforceable jurisdiction, so they don't have to be UK companies. That's a great start for European kind of STO market. And then there's a prospectus light coming up to 20 million. And then US have so would love to hear that because Europe is in my opinion way ahead now on the US on this STOs.
You're in a whole other galaxy at this point.
Yeah. So the Reg Plus, the Reg A Plus,
Reg A Plus.
Give a quick brief on that, and then we have to move to talk about the last thing.
Initial public offerings, IPOs in the US, used to be the traditional exit for tech firms. And all those early founders and all those early investors could finally get liquidity on all their time and all their money by having a public offering. IPOs have become very difficult in the US. In fact, that's part of the reason why everyone went to blockchain and crypto. This was seen as a way to sort of do an end run around the IPO model. Because between Sarbanes-Oxley and the change in the markets, IPOs are hard now. And they happen much later in the corporate lifestyle than they used to before.
8.4 years now to average IPO that used to be 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 4 years.
Yeah, it's gotten very tough.
Yeah, really
tough. Of course, rather than fixing IPOs, which would actually be what would make sense, heaven forbid we do that, we've come out with a new version of Regulation A called Regulation A+, which is a sort of a miniature IPO. It allows for up to $50 million worth of certain kinds of securities to be issued per 12-month period, up to 3 of them in a row.
Exactly, that's right.
And so it's nice.
The last question now, sorry, exactly, that's up to 50 million comparing to European prospectus light that is...
right, and IPOs have no limit.
So now, where will the secondary market liquidity come from? There is currently 6 ATS licenses in America, but and something in brewing here in Europe. So quickly there, which ones will be the first providers of real liquidity?
Well, since I'm into marketing, I will have to answer.
Actually, say the question again. I didn't quite catch it.
Yeah, so the who will be the first liquidity providers? Then, secondary market is now lacking.
I don't have a straight answer. I hope it's some kind of distributed.
That now says for the next time. Then this is.
Yeah, that's for the exchanges, wherever the exchanges will get.
That's my point.
There you go.
That's my point. But there's none now, really operating. T0 can trade 1 token now.
Yes, but we do know that they're coming in the next few months. So we know regulators in Europe, in the Middle East, in the US, everywhere are working in this space. So.
We will have an answer at the next blockchain summit here in Malta.
Exactly. Yeah. Continue on this. Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.